amicable student members. On this occasion, we are honored and excited to have our chief guests, Dr. Tangaraj K. and Dr. Mohua Chakrabarti Chaudhary. I'm inviting Mrs. Manju Rose Matthews to cordially introduce our dignitaries to all of us. Ma'am.
Thank you, Nikita. Good evening, one and all. I'm Manju Rose Matthews, Head of the Department of Media Studies, Nagar College, Trivandrum, from Kerala. On behalf of our principal, Dr. Jolie Jacob, Director and Manager, Reverend Dr. Tito Verghese CMI, and the organizing team, Emil Abraham, Tara CB, Nino PK, and student coordinators, I welcome you all to this webinar on World Rare Disease Day. Nagar College has been organizing public health outreach events since the start of government initiatives for awareness building and tackling misinformation around COVID and vaccination. We developed a digital game, Corona B India game, in 5 languages to provide accurate information to the public in an engaging way. WHO's infodemic team had acknowledged this effort. We are associated with Focus Games UK to develop game-based public health campaigns. Sickle Cell Challenge, a game for children and families with sickle cell disease, is forthcoming in Indian languages. Though the pandemic is still out there with new variants, it is important to refocus on public health challenges due to the genetic and non-communicable diseases. Many of these patients had a tough time to get the required care during the pandemic. As a health communication researcher, I know the patients with NCDs and rare diseases who had a tough time and ordeal during the pandemic and after. As today,
Sorry, I think she's experiencing some technical difficulties.
I think
We'll
she's
just
back.
yeah.
I'm back. I'm back. Hope it's audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir? Yeah. Kindly excuse me. Okay, Dr. Tangaraj currently serves as Director of Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics, CDFT, an autonomous institute under the Department of Biotechnology, Ministry of Science and Technology, situated in Uppal, Eastern Hyderabad, Telangana. Before taking over as Director of CDFT, Dr. Tangaraj was a scientist at the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology since 1993. He is well known for his outstanding contributions in the field of population and medical genetics. His studies have shown that the enigmatic tribal populations of Andaman and Nicobar Islands are the first modern humans who have migrated out of Africa through southern coastal route about 65,000 years ago. Dr. Tangaraj also found that the present-day Indian populations descend from 2 diverse groups, and they have admixed during the past 2,000 to 4,000 years, followed by strict endogamy, hence likely to have population-specific recessive disease. He also found certain deleterious genetic mutations that cause cardiovascular diseases, mitochondrial disorders, and male infertility and developmental sex disorders. And elected fellow of leading Indian scientific academies, he have received several awards and honors from scientific academies, including J.C. Bose Fellowship, Sun Pharma Research Award, Distinguished Scientist Award, etc. Dr. Tangaraj is principal investigator of National Genomics Core established by the Government of India to provide high-end genomic solutions for academia and industry. Recent data indicate that the approximately 10.4% of total population in the world is reported to be married to biological relatives. In North Africa, West Asia, and South India, marriages to biological relatives are culturally flavored and constitute 20 to 50% of marriages. The rates of early childhood malformations have been correlated with the rates of consanguinity. And consanguineous marriage is shown to have high level of reproductive loss, risk of abortion, and neonatal and postnatal death. Welcome, Dr. Thangaraj, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to deliver a talk. I think it's so wonderful to get to know about your activities and promoting science to public outreach. Probably we also should take your help in promoting some of our research programs. With that, can I share the slide and start my talk?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Please let me know whether the slide is in full screen.
Yes, it's in full screen.
Okay, yeah, good. So the title may be slightly different, but the content is the same. Towards end, I'm going to talk about endogamy and its implication. But before that, I thought it would be good to know about our history and how we ended up in marrying within the population or within the family as a consanguinity and endogamy. To begin with, because we are talking about rare diseases, about 70 million people, approximately about 20% of the Indian populations are suffer from various rare diseases. As you see here, different states has different number. This is South Asian kind of statistics and also union territories. If you talk about rare disease, it's something very unique because they're all progressive in nature, because initially individual maybe the children may be sometime all right at the time of birth, but it's progressive nature, chronically debilitating, life-threatening, because most of the rare disease children die less than 5 or maximum 10 years, and heterogeneous clinical condition which are rare in general, but if you go to a particular population, the frequency will be very, very high. That's where I'm going to highlight that how that particular condition came into Indian subcontinent. But if you look at the economic burden, because there's no FDA approved drugs are available, the main problem is it's not a common disease like what you see, cardiovascular disease or cancer disease, where the drug or pharma company can get huge amount of income from there. But this is rare, but the market would be very, very small, and they may not get enough of their return back. Therefore, large number of diseases, there's no drug available. About 95% of rare diseases have no approved treatment, and less than 1 in 10 patients receives disease-specific treatment. And you will be surprised to know the annual recurring cost of one patient would range from 18 lakhs to 1 crore 70 lakhs. You can imagine whether it's affordable to most of the families. And one example is that cystic fibrosis drug, Calidico, is priced at 14,000 pounds per patient per month. And you can imagine that how difficult it is for an average Indian patient. So now I'll take you through that why rare diseases are very common. To understand that, I think we have to go back and see our population history. When you talk about India, and you can easily say that India is an ethnic museum because we have large number of population groups. Some typically look like Africans, as you see here. Some typically look like Europeans with very light skin color. Some typically look like Southeast Asian, the features. And some are very unique to India. You will not see that kind of feature anywhere in the world. Again, some of you may be surprised to know that in India we have 4,635 anthropologically well-defined population groups. Nowhere in the world you will have such a huge human diversity. That includes large number of tribes, primitive tribes, and 36 of them still follow hunters and gatherers lifestyle. That means they'll just go and hunt for food. They don't do any job, including agriculture. Whatever they hunt, they eat, sleep. Again, next day they'll go and for food. Again, to go back and see how such a complex population structure exists in India. To understand that, I'll take you through the human evolution and particularly the modern human. And the modern human arose in Africa about 106 to 200,000 years back. And they started migrating out of Africa and now populated all over the world. And how did they migrate for the first time from Africa? It was a major question until very recently. There are two kinds of hypotheses. One of the hypotheses says that hypothesis driven by many groups, including historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, linguists, geneticists, all of them say that the first modern human might have taken the northern land route because there's some land connection, they must have moved. But other group did not believe that the climatic condition in Europe, even today it's very cold. Think about several thousands of years back, that might not have allowed people to walk through this time. So they believed on southern coastal route, taking southern coastal route because the climatic condition here is not that bad for human early human migration. Again, these are all been supported by the archaeological evidence. Now it suggests that the modern human arrived in Australia about 50,000 years back, in China 39,000 years back, Middle East 47,000 years back, and Europe 40,000 years back. But unfortunately, we don't have any good archaeological tool to say that when did the modern human arrive in Indian subcontinent. There are some excavation, but those samples are not very old. This is one successful genomic study on the bone sample, which was excavated from Harappan region. Most of you must have studied that this is a place where the modern human civilization took place. And this sample, unfortunately, it's not very old. This is only 3000 BCE. And that genome consists of two broader genome. One is the ancestral Indians, and the second one is the primitive Iranian farmers. Okay, it's not giving much information about early human migration, so only 3000 BCE. The second one, very large study, as you see, so many authors studied about 500 bone samples from South and Central Asia. And again, it's not giving much about early human migration, whereas it gives that the sample is only around 3000 BCE. And from Central Asia, they have come to northern part of India, very small proportion. And this is again 2000 BCE. And they also gone this direction to Europe. And probably they are the one who carried Indo-European languages to Europe, as well as they brought to India. So it's not really giving any clue. In the absence of ancient samples, which was found in majority of the place, including Australia, Middle East, Europe, and China, we thought of using the contemporary population because we have huge diversity and people are marrying within the community. Therefore, they preserve their own genome very well. So we used different genetic markers. One is the mitochondrial genome, which we all inherit only from the mother, because this is the egg. This consists of both nuclear genome and mitochondrial genome, whereas the father mitochondrial genome would be in the sperm, mid piece of the sperm at the time of fertilization. Only the nucleus goes. The remaining, including the mitochondria, remains outside. Therefore, no contribution of father's mitochondria. And in order to trace the maternal lineage, we use the mitochondrial DNA. And particularly, it's very, very useful for ancient DNA studies because the copy number is very high here. While the nuclear genome consists of only 2 copies, we have 46 chromosomes, 23 we inherit from father, 23 from the mother. Whereas mitochondria in a cell, if you look at, there are large number of mitochondria, and each one will have large number of mitochondrial DNA. So that means there are some hundreds of copies in a single cell. That helps in studying the ancient sample. Okay, so we used the mitochondrial DNA of several population, about 25,000 individuals. I'm just going to highlight the study which we did on the tribal populations of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which we collected very long back. When you sequence the mitochondrial DNA, based on the mutation which you found in the 16,500 base pair, each mitochondrial DNA sequence can be assigned to a specific haplogroup. These are different haplogroup. This is the root of mitochondrial DNA. Every set of mutation puts them in different mitochondrial haplogroup. As you see here, the L1, L2, L3, they're all restricted to only Africa because this is the root of mitochondrial DNA. From there, people have migrated, and during the migration, we accumulate the mutation. Some are evolutionarily conserved. That's what we use. And you can see the Indians, majority of them are having M, that's immediately after the L. Then this is most evolved haplogroup, which you can see here that U and other things are more common here. So what I'm highlighting is that every continent or country has a specific haplogroup, and this is the root of the mitochondrial haplogroup. When we sequence large number of Indian population, including the Andamanis, which is very interesting population, we thought they would fall into L1, L2, L3 haplogroup, but to our surprise, they have large number of mutations, 200,000, 20,520. These are the positions where there's a DNA change which happened in the 16,500 base pair. These number of mutations are not found anywhere in the world. It is exclusively present only in Andaman tribes. These 2 sets and these sets also. This derive the M haplogroup, but these 2. Therefore, we assigned a new haplogroup which was not being shown anywhere in the world. We also calculated the age of the population based on the mutation rate, and we come to the conclusion that probably the Andaman tribes are the first modern human migrated out of Africa, taking southern coastal route and reached Andaman and Nicobar Islands about 65,000 years back. This is the very first genetic evidence suggesting that the Andamanis are the first modern human who migrated out of Africa. Of course, subsequently, they migrated to Australia, but now we have connection that the Australian Aboriginals, Andaman tribes in Kerala, population called Kurumba, probably you all aware, they show some kind of genetic affinities and suggesting that whatever we have shown is true. And there's no contradiction yet. This is the first genetic evidence, and this is still there. Subsequently, what we have done, we use the nuclear genome. There are 1 million genetic markers across the human nuclear genome has been identified. That helps us in quickly analyze 1 million SNPs. Now we have chosen from 20,000 individuals the 4 major linguistic groups, representative from 4 major linguistic groups: Dravidians, Indo-European, Austroasiatic, Tibeto-Burman, and also the Andamanis. Again, from each linguistic groups, we have selected the social groups, so-called upper caste, middle caste, lower caste tribes, to have a representation from all over India. Then we come up with, again, very strong evidence that in the prehistoric India, there were 2 founding populations. One, we call them as ancestral South Indians. Probably they are part of that early human migration. You can see the Africans and Andamanis are the deep-rooted one, which happened about 65,000 years back. And while Andamanis were migrating, some stayed in southern part of India, whom we call as ancestral South Indian. Then there was second wave of migration. People moved towards north. One group has gone to Europe. Other group has come to northern part of India. And why we put these 2 closer? There are some mutations which are common between Europeans and people from northern part of India, like the skin color mutation, lactate persistent gene mutation, Y chromosome haplogroup R1A1, all are common between these 2. Anyway, so now these 2 founding populations, ancestral South Indian and ancestral North Indians, have admixed in the recent past and gave rise to many population groups. On the other hand, if you look at this, is called as principal component analysis. This again tells you how unique Indian populations are. This is a European sample. There are many samples are here. There's Africans, many samples, and these are Chinese, many samples. But look at Indians, not clustering as we see here. There are many clusters. Okay? Each population is one cluster, suggesting that earlier they were very unique and people have admixed. Therefore, there is a kind of genetic link between the group. Although everybody is unique, but there are some kind of genetic affinities between the groups. So now what I'm going to tell you is that when this admixture took place, ancestral North Indian and ancestral South Indians. Okay, to study that, we took large number of samples from South and large number of samples from the North. And we came to the conclusion that the ancestral South Indian and ancestral North Indians have initially gave rise to many population groups. But during the last 2,000 to 4,000 years, these 2 founding populations have admixed. The color indicates that different proportion of admixture. For example, if you take somebody extreme South, they will have more of ancestral South Indian genome, very small proportion of ancestral North Indian genome. On the other hand, if you go to North, extreme North, they'll have more of ancestral North Indians and less of ancestral South Indians. So in that process, except Andamanis, there's no population in the mainland without any admixture. They're all admixture with different proportion. The color indicates that people have admixed. What happened after admixing? Every single population then maintained the endogamy for the last 2,000 years, precisely 1,900 years. So that is what making every population as very unique, which has happened much before the caste system. The marriage within the group happened much before the caste system. Probably the caste system must have put more pressure on every population to maintain the endogamy. Endogamy means marrying within the population. So this is what is the problem now. So because last 2,000 years, every single population is marrying within the group, naturally, we all accumulate a mutation, whenever there's population which is in isolation for a very long time, thousands of years, we have naturally occurring mutation. If the mutations are in the non-coding region or intergenic region, it's not going to affect the individual. But if it is in the coding region, definitely is going to affect the individual. Those mutations are restricted to only in this population. For example, some mutation arose here. It's going to be here because he or she is not marrying to another population. Similarly, whatever mutation happened is going to restrict there, but not going to any other population. That's mainly because of the endogamy, marrying within the population. So now what I'm going to tell you is that how that has impact on our health and diseases. So this is what probably you are interested much more to know about. To understand that, so this time we are not restricting only within India. Now we wanted to look at in entire South Asian population. We included samples from all the South Asian countries, including Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and other South Asian countries. So these are the places where the samples have been collected. We have 2,800 individuals from 275 populations, and they are from all the 4 linguistic groups and also from some of the isolated languages like Andamanis, Nepalese, and few more. Again, we used 1 million genetic markers. So interestingly, we came to know that because of the endogamy, because every population accumulated unique set of mutation, now we predicted that at least 1/3 of the populations are expected to have a population-specific recessive disease-causing mutation. So therefore, there's a lot of opportunities for the next generation, particularly students who are more interested in human genetics, to study large number of such population, identify the mutation, and try to understand the impact of this mutation, and try to help the population in many ways. Okay, so I'll give you some of the example what we are planning to do. And before that, I want to highlight, I mentioned that about 1/3 of the Indian populations are expected to have population-specific disease based on the IBD score. IBD means identity by descent. In a simple term, how to explain that is that if you take 2 individuals who are saying that they are really unrelated, and if you take their DNA sequence, probably about 10 kb region, 10,000 bases, and if you assemble that, if they are really unrelated, they will show more variation. You expect at least every 500 base pair or 1 kb region, there will be a difference between 2 unrelated individuals. But if they are from the same community, they say that they are unrelated. If you don't find any variation, that means both of them today they say that unrelated, they must have come from a common ancestor. So based on that, the IBD, what you are looking at is that every single line represent 1 population, because we use 275 population. And we also included 2 population which have been well studied, who also practice endogamy like India, Ashkenazi Jewish and the Finnish population. You can see their IBD score is little tiny compared to large number of Indian population, which has several fold higher IBD. Okay. And I can say that because these 2 populations have been well studied, and you can see that there are large number of diseases have been mapped in those populations. This is Ashkenazi Jewish, and you can see these are the genes and these are the disease. And you can also see most of them are autosomal recessive in nature. I'll tell you what it means, autosomal recessive. You can see the Finnish populations, they also have large number of such diseases. And you can imagine that with this tiny IBD score itself, they have large number of diseases. And you can see the consequences of large number of Indian populations who have several fold higher IBD. That means most of the Indian populations are expected to have large number of population specific disease because of endogamy marriage practice. That means marrying within the group. I want to highlight that what that recessive mutation means. I mentioned earlier that we have 46 chromosomes, 23 we inherit from the father, 23 from the mother. Right? So that become 23 pairs or 46 chromosomes. If the mutation is in one of the pair, for example, take chromosome 1, there are two chromosomes 1 we inherit from father, one from the mother. So one of the chromosome has a mutation, and if they express the disease, that's the dominant. But one of the chromosome carry the mutation, doesn't express the disease, that's the recessive. Okay. And the person carrying the mutation but not showing the disease doesn't mean that he or she is absolutely free from the mutation. Because it's a recessive in nature, it's not expressing the disease. So it requires 2 copies of the mutation to express the disease. This pedigree is called pedigree or family tree. If you put circle, that indicates female, square indicates male. If you put line here, that means these two have married. If you put line down and put either circle or square, that indicates daughter and son. In this case, these two are married, now wife and husband, they have 2 daughters. And they have married somebody, 1 daughter, again 1 daughter. But what I'm going to show you here is there's a pair of chromosomes. 1 chromosome has a mutation. He doesn't have that mutation. So this is called as heterozygous mutation. He has the wild type. Because it's a recessive nature, there's no disease here. Okay. But she carries the mutation. Then she is passing on that mutation to the next generation. Both the daughters are carrying that mutation. So both of them married somebody from outside. So no problem. Again, it is going in heterozygous condition. This way, again, going in heterozygous condition this way. Until several generations, if it is the heterozygous condition, there's no problem at all because it's a recessive in nature. But after a few generations, this girl carries the mutation, this boy also carries the mutation in the heterozygous condition. Both looks absolutely normal. But if they marry, they pass on these 2 abnormal chromosomes, statistically 1/4 of chance that they transmit the abnormal chromosome. Then it causes the disease because of this homozygous condition. So this condition is very, very common among Indian populations. We wanted to test that. We took a well-known recessive disease. We collected some 30 patients. We collected their DNA blood sample. And this is called progressive pseudorheumatoid dysplasia. It's a joint swelling and with very severe pain. All the 30 patients, their parents are absolutely fine because they are with heterozygous mutation. We sequenced and found 6 patients carry a specific mutation in a gene called WISP3G in a homozygous condition. Both the copies are with the mutation. Parents are with heterozygous. Now we wanted to see whether all the 6 have come from a common ancestor. So we sequenced the flanking region on both the sides of the DNA to see whether they show a same haplotype. That means there's no variation at all. Surprisingly, we found 5 out of 6 patients are with the same haplotype. That means today they are unrelated, but this mutation is common. They carry it generation after the generation because the father and mother and their father and mothers are carrying the heterozygous mutation. There is no disease at all. But unfortunately, the 2 with heterozygous mutation married and gave rise to such a children. There are several more examples. Here with the pedigree again, you can see there's a mutation in a gene called polymerase gamma. This is a nuclear gene, chromosomal gene, which is essential for mitochondrial DNA replication. I mean, DNA replicate, make similar copies. For that, there's an enzyme is required, polymerase, that comes from nuclear DNA. There's a one single base mutation. What you see here, it's a wild type. C become T, right? Parents are heterozygous. There are 2 copies are there, like 2 hands and the finger, 5 finger. If you look at, it appears like only 1, right? Same way, there are 2 copies of the chromosomes are here. They are identical sequence. That this particular place, there's only C. But the parents, 1 chromosome is with the C, 1 chromosome with the T. That's why there's a mutation, any chromosome that appears like this. The parents, both the parents are with heterozygous mutation, C and T, but they are absolutely fine. Whereas, unfortunately, they transmitted the mutant chromosome to 2 of their 3 children. Unfortunately, this leads to several abnormalities. Encephalopathy, seizures, stroke-like episode, and most importantly, it leads to premature death. And you can see the brain MRI shows a lot of lesions, and in the DNA, this is intact DNA, mitochondrial DNA. This 1 base pair mutation introduced a lot of multiple mitochondrial DNA deletions. And these are some of the abnormality in the tissue. So this is the condition very clearly demonstrating that consanguineous marriage, both the parents are absolutely fine, but carrier, they are carrying the mutation. 2 of their children died. And this child, fortunately, with heterozygous mutation. Now, the family knows there's a mutation. And even when this boy grows and wanted to, their parents want him to marry somebody from the family, right, or from outside, they can actually test whether the girl also carry this mutation or not. That doesn't cost much, few hundred rupees, right? Here, this is a non-consanguineous family. This is a consanguineous, you can see, but this is a non-consanguineous family, but still parents are heterozygous. That means that particular mutation is well spread in that particular population. So now we also try to look at how the population which we identified with very high IBD score, initial study, we did not look at any of the patients. We only want the sample to understand the population history. Now, knowing that large number of populations are with high IBD score, we predicted that most of them might carry the disease-causing gene. So we used some of the population. So one of the population called Kallar from Tamil Nadu, we went back and asked whether there's a disease in the population. And it's very sad that we found children with a disease called junctional erythritidis epidermolysis bullosa. This causes skin rashes and also congenital heart disease, and the children die at very early age. Again, you can see similar situation. Parents are heterozygous, absolutely fine, but the children are with homozygous mutation. They die at very early age. Then we went on to look at several families. We found 8 families are having such conditions. And now it's our duty to help the family. We found that there's 11 base per deletion a gene. The first time we identify nowhere else it has been reported. Now we thought of screening the entire family, but initially we came to know that there's a woman who is pregnant with the known premature death in the family. We asked the family to, the mother to go to Chennai and get the amniotic fluid. We wanted to test and help the family. We designed a primer such a way that it amplifies 2 alleles. One is the wild type, one with the mutant. These are known heterozygous. This is a homozygous wild type. And homozygous deletion, we don't have to check. That means this band will not be there, only this band will be there. So this is amniotic fluid where you could see 2 bands. Therefore, the fetus is with heterozygous, and we advise them to continue the pregnancy. So once you identify the mutation, we can actually help the families in such a way that if you do this practice for a few generations, in fact, we can eliminate the mutation from the population itself. So that's a very, very important aspect of doing the basic science. So having all this background, we approached DBT, Department of Biotechnology, that we wanted to have a mission program on pediatric rare diseases. The DBT supported, and we have collectively gone with 20 different institutes all over India. As you see, CDFD is the nodal institute, and we have 20 different institutes involving geneticists, involving pediatrics department. We wanted to get a sample from unknown rare diseases. We wanted to sequence either whole genome or exome, identify the variants, and characterize those variants using different animal model. If it is a new mutation, nobody knows what is its impact. We have to introduce that mutation and see whether animal also gets similar phenotypic features. Once we identify, then we also try to treat some of the patients using newer technologies. And we wanted to advise, give the families and the populations whoever is having the mutation, genetic counseling, sometimes prenatal diagnosis, as I said, sometimes premarital counseling also would help in avoiding such families. And most importantly, this would be probably will take your help to awareness program to make people aware of the rare disease, make aware that such program is going on. Therefore, if somebody with rare disease can approach us, and we can help the families. So with that, I thank all of those who contributed to some of the studies which I mentioned. And thank you so much for listening. If you have any question, I'm indeed happy to address.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving such a valuable information. Now let's move on to the question and answer session. The first question for you is, how to control genetic disorder like sugar, piles, etc.? Should I repeat the question? How to control genetic disorders like sugar, piles, etc.?
Control sugar, that means diabetic, right? Somebody is asking how to control diabetics genetically.
Yeah, yes.
If it is a genetic, it's difficult to correct, right? Although there are techniques for correcting genetics, but diabetics is easy to manage because with exercise, controlling diet, diabetes can be managed, unlike other diseases. Some of the disease, very difficult. We don't have drug yet, particularly like the rare diseases. Avoid any genetic disease. Prevention is best rather than treating. So whatever I suggested towards the end of my talk, It gives better prevention. Therefore, we will not have a child with rare disease or any disease.
So here is your second question. Information about screening of rare diseases are very minimally discussed in public space. How can we spread awareness about screening for rare disease at a wider scale? What are the screening modes?
Yeah, that is what we are trying to do. As I mentioned towards the end of my talk, we have now made small videos, a couple of minutes videos. We are translating that into almost all the languages through our collaborators who are there throughout India. Would release that through social media or whatever the best approachable medias, and that would reach the people, and through that people can able to benefit out of this.
So here comes the third question. With the current healthcare systems thriving and discovering newer drugs and treatments for the betterment of mankind, are there still any challenging cases of rare diseases?
Yes, still large number of rare diseases. As I mentioned, about 7,000 rare diseases, and government is putting a lot of energy and money for addressing some of the rare diseases. ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, has constituted consortium kind of thing where there are 7 subgroup. Each one look at different aspects of the disease, and Ministry of Health and Child Wealth and Women Wealth. So they also come up with a new program where they can, of course, give money which can at least help in treating very few number of patients. And the DBT gave us maybe about 100 crore for looking at the pediatric rare disease program. So now things have changed. I hopefully that after 2-3 decades, we will have much better India.
Now comes the fourth question. The Indian community is generally ignorant towards rare diseases and genetic disorders. How can it be prevented and get them aware of it? How to normalize diseases or syndromes in general?
Yeah, so that's what we already discussed, that people should know about the cause. Once we know that, okay, this is genetic mutation which is responsible for this particular rare disease, treatment is one part. That requires a lot of help from pharma companies, because they may not invest huge amount of money, because finally only few hundreds or thousands going to buy the medicine, because that's why the cost of those medicines are very, very high. On the other hand, once you know the mutation, that can be screened in the population. And as I mentioned towards end, prenatal diagnosis will help. Premarital testing will also help. That would take some time for people to understand, but we are very aggressive in taking that to public. Therefore, we can avoid such rare diseases in the future.
One of our participants, she is saying that I am in mid-20s. This is the first time I'm listening to such an expert talk about a rare disease, such as the ones you mentioned. And how can we create awareness on the topic outside science domain?
Yeah, again, this also we discussed. We wanted to release just a couple of minute video telling about some of the background, because we want to condense everything, how it happens, how one can prevent, where to approach if they come across some of the rare disease patients. So all this would be translated in many languages, and I'm sure that that would reach to common people. And I'll also take help, because you are also doing outreach program. I'll take help from your college also.
So this is the last question. Do you think the ever-increasing gender bifurcations pose a challenge to controlling mutations?
We cannot control the mutation, right? That is a natural thing. But we can, once you know that that mutation is going to cause, not all the mutations are going to cause the disease. Even the mutation which caused the disease somewhere else may not cause the disease here. And some mutation which may cause the disease here may not cause some other country, because there is some other mutation which would suppress. So not all the mutation which are only in the coding region, which change amino acid or stop the synthesis of amino acid, only those stop codon and so on would be harmful. But nobody can control that. So once you have the mutation, then you see how to prevent that, how to take care of those. But we cannot actually prevent any mutation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for valuable information. Now over to HOD.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Dr. Thangaraj, for the nice talk, which explained in a simple way. And scientists, when communicate in a layman's language, it benefits the society to understand the complex research issues. Thank you, sir, once again.
It was my pleasure talking. I hope that those who have participated in this would benefit and spread this about rare disease program which we have. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Our next speaker, Dr. Mohua Chakrabarti Chowdhury, is a DST STI Policy Fellow at the Center for Policy Research, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Mohua works on health policy research focusing on aspects of equitable and inclusive health that can benefit all sections of society. She has specific interest in understanding the challenges faced by the rare disease community in India and identifying the policy and public health interventions that can help to provide better quality of life to such individuals and families. Her research is targeted at understanding the challenges faced by the rare disease community in India and identifying the policy and public health interventions that can help to provide better quality of life to such individuals and families. Her work also includes analysis of orphan drug approval system and clinical trials data. Further, as part of SDIP 2020 Secretariat, she works with the core team in formulating the upcoming India's 5th National Science Policy. Welcome, Dr. Mohua.
Hello. Yeah, thank you everyone for having me here. I'm just trying to share my screen. Is my video on?
Yes.
Okay, just give me a moment to share my screen.
Yeah, sure.
And let me know when it is up there.
Now it is visible, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. Is it in the slide sharing mode? Is it showing in the slide sharing mode?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. So before I begin, I would like to thank the organizers for having Dr. Thangaraj here. It has been a wonderful time listening to him, to the amazing work he has done over the time. I mean, it has been a learning experience for everyone. After that, I don't know how much additional information I would be able to give about rare diseases. I hope to give some perspective regarding maybe the kind of work that I do, so that the students get an idea of how to contribute to rare disease space. So with that, I'll start with a quick introduction to rare diseases. As Professor already said, that even if we say them rare, Collectively, they affect almost 300 million people in the world, which is approximately 6 to 8% of the global population. And in India, as you are very aware now, due to endogamy and consanguinity and other reasons, it is estimated that it could be over 72 million people living with rare diseases. Basically, they are severe debilitating diseases. I'm trying to focus on telling you about the challenges of the patients. So when I start, it's the major problem is that many are not diagnosed. Many remain undiagnosed. So when we say we have 7,000, 8,000 diseases, these are just a tiny fraction of it which have been diagnosed so far. But many of these diseases do not have a name. So we don't count them. Many remain undiagnosed. These are just conditions that people have to live with. And there's a huge lack of awareness. There are many doctors. It's just not within the general population. It is also within the medical fraternity, among the researchers, or among every stakeholder that you can think of. Another major challenge is that this is not a disease that you get suddenly and then you have a cure and you are back to your life. This is something, for most of the cases, these are mutations, something that you were born with, and you have to live with it. So it doesn't only require a treatment, it also requires lifelong management. There are numerous challenges that they have to face in the entire lifespan that they have to be living with. So the solutions to their problem is just not the drugs or the treatment. It is also, it could be very tiny things like a wheelchair mobility device or a feeding device, very, very small things which have a small impact on the quality of life. Even that has a huge impact. Apparently, it would look like a small impact to others, but for them, it's a huge change in their life, improvement in the quality of the life. Another huge problem presently, which I'll be talking later point as well, is the treatment cost. Just to give you a perspective of it, Luxturna is a therapy, is a drug for retinitis pigmentosa. The cost of one injection for one eye, it's a eye disorder, retinitis pigmentosa. One injection, one eye for one eye costs 1 million. Then you must have seen there were a lot of awareness done regarding SMA, spinal muscular atrophy. We have the drug approved in India now. Now the FDA drug is available in India now. Some of the patients are getting. One drug costs 16 crore rupees. That is the annual treatment cost. So that is the kind of cost margin that is there, which is almost unaffordable for many of the patients. And that is why rare diseases cannot be dealt with all other diseases. They need special intervention. In terms of policy, they need special policy. So globally, they have been dealt with different policies like rare disease policy, orphan drug policy, healthcare policies, and other relevant policies that all have to come together to address them in a different way. I'll now, I think I can safely skip this slide, because this was just to give an idea of what kind of rare diseases. Some of the common diseases I included, like progeria and Duchenne muscular dystrophy, epidermolysis bullosa. The idea was that this is just an umbrella. Rare disease is an umbrella term to identify many of the diseases, which could be spanning many domains, many clinically they are very different representations. So do not confuse it to be a one kind of or one pattern of disease. This can be, it could affect different organs or multiple organs together. Just the thing is, it is identified in a cluster called rare disease only if it affects lesser number of population individually. So how do we define rare disease? So WHO, the definition is largely based on prevalence. If it is affecting lesser than a certain threshold of population, then it is called rare disease. Many of the countries have followed the same. Some of the countries like Japan, they also include another point, which is the severity of the disease. In India, we have a rare disease policy which did not officially had any definition for rare diseases. But one definition we had, which was from the new drug and clinical trial rules in India, 2019, which defined that any, which actually came for orphan drugs, which defined orphan drugs are not rare disease. So orphan drugs are the drugs used for rare diseases. It defines that any drug that can cure, that is used for a condition that affects fewer than 5 lakh people in India would be considered orphan drug. So that way, that is the only threshold in India that we have. But we do not have a definition because we do not have a prevalence data. I'll just quickly give you an overview of my work here, what I do, to give a perspective of what I'm going to say later. So just a context of it. So I basically do health policy research with particular focus on rare disease. So my work is to understand the rare disease ecosystem in India. Who are the key stakeholders? What roles do they play? What is their power interest dynamics? And then contribute to and find how to enable strengthening of the rare disease ecosystem in India. It could be done through key public health policies, understand what drugs are available for rare diseases, make the drugs and treatments more accessible and affordable to the people, and also to assess the readiness level of the state. Every state in India, as you know, health is a state subject. Every state health delivery system is very different and in very different state as well. So to assess how rare diseases cannot be uniformly addressed through every state, it has to be assessed separately. So all of this I look into. In that, I think that what I found was that rare disease patients themselves are a very important stakeholders, and patient-centric approach has to be taken to enable delivering any input into the system. So my research findings are disseminated to the stakeholders, the patients and other stakeholders as well. And from them, the knowledge that we gain, we put it back into our research process. So my research leads into evidence synthesis and also policy inputs, which I've contributed to some of the policies. We do public outreach and awareness programs and participation in policy process as well. Coming back to the rare diseases, so as I already said, let's look into the journey of these patients. So, and this we are talking about 300 million people in the world. And almost 50% of them are rare children, 80% are genetic. So there's a huge misdiagnosis and lack of awareness and all that happening. And it is seen that the patients, on an average, it takes 7 to 8 years for diagnosis. In the process, the patients have to see around 8 to 10 physicians. This is a general observation. This is a Western data that I'm talking about. India, it is nevertheless, it could be even more. We have seen patient families running all across the country among different cities to find a diagnosis. Not even a treatment. After the diagnosis, most of the time they don't have a treatment, but just for the diagnosis, they are running across the country. This is a very popular diagram by Nord for the rare disease journey of the patient, just to give the complex, process they have to go for many years before they end up in a diagnosis. And only, as you can see from this, out of 141 patients are actually misdiagnosed or do not end up with a diagnosis. And again, giving a caution, these are all Western data. India, we do not have that kind of research done and data, and the situation could be even worse. Now, if we see what are the top challenges. So in terms of top challenges, let us start with what are the top challenges the providers face. I mean, the doctors, how do they face? So globally also, and especially in India, 40% reported that lack of rare disease education. In medical education curriculum, their rare diseases are not given any priority. Then there are limited number of facilities in health systems specializing in rare disease states. Then lack of awareness of symptoms related to rare disease. So when a patient presents with a group of symptoms, it is very often not related to certain condition which is existing, or that the standard diagnosis protocol is not available. So most often either they are not diagnosed, they are given management therapies for each of the symptom that they are facing. Many a times multiple organs are affected, so the patient are usually put on many drugs for symptomatic treatment of each of the uh, symptoms. Then lack of clinical trials for many diseases, that is another huge problem, and this is because hardly any approved drugs are not there for almost 95% of the diseases. So clinical trials become very important source of treatment and just a hope for these patients. And yeah, again, as I said, there's a shortage of physicians specializing in rare disease states. Okay, I don't know why my slide. Okay. So as you can understand, the challenges are multidimensional. If we can see, there's the major challenge would be lack of awareness, lack of research, lack of medical facilities, and lack of supportive ecosystem. So in lack of awareness, we talk about all the stakeholders, as I said, causes leads to delay in diagnosis, poor quality life of the patient. Then in lack of research, India, globally, whatever is studied, whatever data we have, Indian population there's not much study that have been done on the mutations of the Indian population for those particular diseases that are most commonly known and for which the drugs are there. And since the drugs are mostly like the gene therapy and cell therapy drugs are coming, so in that it becomes even more important that Indian populations are studied and their mutations are known before those drugs are simply like other small molecular drugs. They're simply kind of approved for application into Indian patients. There's lack of prevalence data for most of the diseases and lack of domestic orphan drug development. That is a huge I think ground opportunity that has to be looked into. And there are various reasons. There's a huge unmet need for the patients, and also there's a huge opportunity in this field, and that is why orphan drug development opportunity has to be leveraged and given more focus on now. So lack of medical facilities, as I already said, non-availability of orphan drugs, which are already approved elsewhere, high cost of the drugs, and resources are limited to major cities. So what we see is that even if for some of the rare diseases, there are some treatments available now, management are been done way better than what it was just few years back, but this is very limited to only few major cities in the country. Beyond that, there's nothing. There's total ignorance about those diseases, and any patient who has to get any treatment, they have to travel to these few major cities. In terms of lack of supportive policy, the national policy for rare diseases have to be operational, have to meet all the goals that it has directed in its policy document. There's a lack of all the expenses are borne out of pocket, lack of healthcare coverage, and lack of social support, because most of these diseases come with disabilities, both physical, mental, and other limitations as well. So the lack of social supportive system, inclusive education, inclusion in the job, and various other factors come into making their life, changing the quality of their life. So this is what I spoke so far about the challenges the providers face, challenges the patients face. Now, if we talk about what are the challenges in rare disease research, so as Professor already mentioned that since the population is less, technically just think that the companies won't be interested because the market for the drugs, it's very limited. So and that goes for that has the other end also, that when research is done, then n is so low, the number of patients, that it is difficult to get sufficient number of patients to prove for the research. Also the population are so mostly diverse and geographically dispersed, that it is very difficult to connect to all of these people and get the samples. In India, it is challenge. The challenges are also that most of them go undiagnosed. Only few are diagnosed, and for that, the data are not shared sufficiently. There is not sufficient platform for sharing of data. So whatever is known is also not well connected. All the components of the ecosystem are not well connected. So yeah, there are multiple challenges for the researchers as well. So yeah, so in this slide, I'm trying to come towards some of the initiatives that have been started. So this is the UN resolution for rare diseases, which came up in December 2021. I, being a member of the WHO Global Collaborative Network for Rare Diseases, we have worked towards adoption of the UN resolution, and now we are working towards establishing a global hub for rare diseases, which will have a global hub and regional hubs as well. So the UN resolution identified all the problems, that it's not a problem for a small population, totally a huge population is affected. These diseases are chronic, progressive, degenerative, disabling. So they do need proper intervention from global public health, focus, and that is why they are trying to focus in disseminating knowledge and information, and also raising awareness and recognition of these diseases, which so far had been missing from WHO health agenda. They identify that suffering from a disease which do not have sufficient number of other affected individual doesn't mean that this individual is deprived of the right of healthcare, right? So even if my disease is not affecting large number of population, I do have the right to access healthcare the same way as other common diseases having. So just based on this premises, WHO is taking up the challenge of addressing the concerns for these diseases as well. So that appropriate care and national strategies are shaped in a way that these diseases are addressed. So now, talking about public health interventions for rare diseases, I'd like to highlight one of our work that we have been doing. We are trying to see how to address rare diseases through the existing public health programs in India. So what we did was we studied the National Health Mission program for rare diseases. In that, and we tried to understand the utility, expandability, and limitations of existing public health care programs. Why we were studying when rare disease policy has already come, which is like a special policy for these diseases, still we were trying, because India is a resource constrained setting. In such a healthcare system, it will not be possible to have an entire separate pipeline to addressing diseases which individual diseases affecting smaller number of population. So what we have to target is the existing healthcare programs which are already reaching to the masses, operating at a very grassroots level. We have to identify those challenges and channels. We have to identify those channels and leverage on their capabilities to kind of address the need for rare disease as well. In this, I would like to also point that when most of the public health programs were designed, these were designed keeping the infectious diseases in mind. So the major focus were around infectious diseases, around malnutrition, deficiencies, so that kind of program. However, the public health program in India is very strongly connected to the grassroots. That is a big strength that the public health program so far has been there. And when we studied, we found that Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram was an excellent program which could actually facilitate in prevention initiatives of rare disease programs. Rare disease policy, it has certain focus towards prevention initiatives that can be easily addressed to Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram. What it does is that it employs, as you can see, ASHA or grassroots level healthcare workers, which are non-specialists who are given training in certain certain data collection methods, and they are members from these communities who have very close connection to the community, and so they are they gain the confidence of the community as well, and they can easily penetrate the community and keep a track of things happening there. So leveraging on the Asha workers, Asha workers, Anganwadi workers, ANM, and mobile health teams that go around. So what we saw that the 4Ds, which are targeted by RBSK program, disabilities, birth defect, deficiency, and developmental delay, including disabilities, all this can be easily identified and screened, and if a proper data collection method is there, then it can also be recorded, and such cases can be easily referred to the next level of community health program, which is the DEIC, District Early Intervention Center. And if they cannot be addressed there, they can also be taken to a next higher level, which is the Center of Excellence of Rare Diseases, which is planned from the rare disease policy again. And if that connectivity is established, then many of the diseases can be easily identified, recorded, and also management, whatever is available, can be given to this patients, which mostly go undiagnosed as of now. So as a next step, what we are trying to do is we have got this international network for governmental science advice award. In that, what we are trying to do is we are trying to go to this community health workers, ASHA, ANMs, and Anganwadi, try to understand what problems they are facing in collecting this kind of data, in screening this kind of diseases, if they are doing it, because Rashtriya Bal Swasthya already mandates some of it, some of the diseases, but what we are trying is to make it more kind of broad based to identify more rare diseases, but we are trying to understand what are the problems they are facing in collecting the data and also reporting it back. So once we understand that problem, we are trying to give policy suggestions and policy interventions based on the input that we get from this grassroots healthcare workers, who are one of the, by the way, who are one of the most important actors in this ecosystem. So yeah, so there I gave a quick mention about the Rare Disease Care Coordination Center, which is a unique concept in India, where we are trying to have different patients, hospital, doctors, experts, like multiple stakeholders come together, and this will be done in a hub and spoke model. Some of the centers have already, with having multidisciplinary kind of facilities, have already been 8 centers have been identified in India, and they will work as a rare disease center of excellence, and they will also connect to other centers where the screening identification would be done, and some of the interventions that are available will be given through these centers. These kind of approach will help to identify more patients and enable more diagnosis and subsequently more treatment. So these are some of the rare disease care coordination centers which are functioning now. As you can see in the left is the rare disease center at the Indira Gandhi Hospital in Bangalore. and the other is in JSS Hospital, Mysore, and both are functioning, and many children are getting many therapies like enzyme replacement therapy. Gaucher disease patients get enzyme replacement therapies, and this enzyme replacement therapies have actually helped to help many of the Gaucher disease patients to live normal life. These children who had very limited age without any treatment are actually going to schools and colleges now. So that's a huge success story. So yeah, so as I have been saying that national policies and guidelines, these act as, I'll not go too deep into it. So these act as a facilitator for enabling focus of the public healthcare into the rare diseases. So in Indian context, now that just to give you a brief history, 2018 the first national policy had came, but 2020 the revised policy was released, and there three group of disorders have been identified. One that is amenable to one-time treatment, and these are mostly the high-cost one-time treatment, which are mostly the interventional treatment like operations and organ replacement, organ transplant, and all that. So government does allocate a certain amount of financial aid to help a patient approach that. But again, just a word of caution, the pipeline for accessing this financial aid has not been clearly laid, and that is why many patients are facing problem in acquiring that, in assessing that aid. Anyways, the group 2 disorders requires long-term, lifelong treatment, like the enzyme replacement therapy, which I said, which are relatively lower cost, but they do the benefit has been documented in the literature. Then group 3 diseases are the ones for which the treatment are available, as I said. In spinal muscular atrophy, the 16 crore drug, and retinitis pigmentosa, where the $1 million injection for the eye was available. So these therapies are available. The challenge is to access these drugs. So yeah, so as you can see, there are multiple level of challenges that are there. One is that drug is available but not accessible to the patient. The other is drug is not available, and then for those which are relatively lower cost and drug is accessible, the problem is the patient has to survive on this drug for lifelong. So like even the blood disorders, where the blood transfusion has to happen very frequently, which affects the patient's health and also their life. So multiple level of challenges these patients face. Yeah. So what is the solution? The solution, if I may say, yeah. So I'm skipping some of the drugs where I was talking about the orphan drug designation due to the lack of time. Yeah. So I'll just quickly come to the last slide, maybe, which is that what is the solution to all this? What we are seeing is globally, as we can easily see, that since the market is less, the pharmaceutical companies are not interested in these drugs. However, this was true until the Orphan Drug Act of 1983 came up in USA. Following that, in the past 10-year data, if you see the top graph, there has been a huge rise in the number of orphan approvals happening in the world globally. This is the FDA approval data, but same goes for EU approvals as well. And if you see the projection for 2022 to 2026, there's a huge uprise in the market of the orphan drug sales. And these are largely due to some of the incentives that these drugs were getting. So to attract companies to this assumably non-profitable industry, non-profitable market, what the US Orphan Drug Initiative did was that to give it special legislative advantages, like giving 7 years of market exclusivity, priority review, expedited review, tax waiver, application fee waiver, and many such incentives were given to attract the companies. What that did was, suppose marketing exclusivity gives you a safe period of 7 years where no competitor can enter, and your product can only be there. And that also became one of the major reasons for this exorbitant pricing of the drugs. Next, one of the important thing was the clinical trial innovative design. So since the number of patients are very less, the clinical trial approval process also has approval for a special pathway of clinical trial, which allows small patient size, which gives relaxed endpoints. And also virtual clinical trials are done because the patient population are widely dispersed. All of these gives advantages to the pharmaceutical company to actually invest in these drugs, and that is why we can see the uprising over the last few years. And research opportunity. So only 5% of all these drugs, all these diseases, only 5% has a drug. So there is and most of the drugs are also supportive therapy. There are no curative therapy so far. And it has been seen that identification of cellular and molecular pathways associated with these diseases actually leads to identification of cellular and molecular pathways of other more common diseases. And there are multiple examples of that. Also, many of the drugs which were used for common diseases are repurposed and used for rare diseases. However, in this process, these drugs again get an orphan drug designation and gets all the incentives and market exclusivity and everything that a new molecular entity, orphan drugs, gets. So that way, what happened, that led to the orphan drug race in the world. However, in India, we sort of missed this race. Now, what could happen to change the rare disease landscape and bring the focus of Indian pharmaceutical, which is significantly huge. What could be done is we could, if there is a legislative change in orphan drug and an orphan drug policy is brought in, we could significantly bring in the interest of Indian pharmaceutical industry, and subsequently, if they bring interest, they can fund basic science researchers and other researchers and bring their focus on rare diseases. And all of this will lead to a race of orphan drug discovery and development in India as well. So yeah, so hoping for that, with a positive note, I would like to end my talk today. And these are some of my recent publications regarding to rare diseases, which some of the students might find helpful. So yeah, thanks again, and special thanks on this Rare Disease Day to all the rare disease patients whose brave journey has motivated me to get into this initiative. Thank you, everyone, and yeah, open to the questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Amokha Chakrabarti Chowdhury, for the informative session. And now let's move on to the question and answer session. The first question for you is here. Recently, we have faced a terrible disease, and its impact has been negatively affected among a large number of people and their lives. So, is this the time we need to reconstruct a medical protocol for the people?
So yeah, so again, you see, so I think, so if I'm getting the question, it's about COVID, right? Yeah. So COVID, so it's the irony. COVID, there were coronavirus research happening before as well, right? Many diseases affected by corona. So until it affected the huge number of populations, it became a pandemic. And that is when all the focus, all the resources, all the importance went into these diseases, and see how successfully we could handle it, right? From global perspective and especially India perspective. If you just take the India example also, you can see just because our resources, our focus, our energies were invested in one particular disease, we could actually achieve things that we didn't imagine before. So similarly, if we have the right focus, other diseases can also be tackled in the right time. Yeah.
Ma'am, there is a question about orphan drugs. they'd like to know more on orphan drugs.
Yeah, so more on orphan drugs from what perspective? So orphan drugs, as I said, are drugs which are used to treat rare diseases. Why the term orphan? Because initially the pharmaceutical industry didn't find it profitable, and they they did not take these drugs into consideration for development. So they were termed orphan. But mind it, they are no longer orphan. They are the most sought after drugs now. So yeah, they are the like special child now.
Actually, India is a research powerhouse of biotechnology. Then what is preventing scientists to address drug development?
I really like the word in the question. What is preventing? Preventing is, I think, one is the policy. I'll say the policy focus. We have the energy, we have the capabilities, we have things already moving on at various scales. But if we have a focused policy, just connecting this developments that are happening, there are multiple startups happening with particular focus. Many universities and research centers are already working on many diseases. Some are working at the diagnostic level, finding out the mutations. Many are working at the genomic intervention level. Many isolated efforts, I would say, is happening. But if we have a concerted policy effort where all these efforts are linked and focus towards a single goal, I think there's nothing stopping. We definitely can come up with solutions to some of the diseases.
Here's the next question. Do you think the financial inequality in India has often become a barrier between treatment and misdiagnosis?
Financial, yeah. So it's very interesting. In case of rare diseases, in some of the cases, we actually see that it has actually definitely. There are many factors, social determinants, which impact how the disease is impacting you. For example, a child with a disability born in a financially better condition will have a better wheelchair and other equipments and better mobility assistance, right? And also access to supportive treatment, whereas a child in a lower economic status will not have access to even all this. Now, talking about the drugs that are available for a handful of the diseases are so exorbitant that in the economic divide also kind of fades away. No one, even the upper middle class, are not able to afford 16 crore drug, right? So that is a differentiator, like that differentiator goes. But quality of life wise, that's a huge impact that is having. Even access to the the interventional treatments that are required is very much dependent on just not only financial, it's also geographical. Like, where are you? Like, if you are in Bangalore, the kind of facilities you will get is very different if you are in northeastern part of India. So yeah.
So, ma'am, actually, you have given some insight on the patient's journey. But how much is root level healthcare workers like ASHA workers aware of identifying rare diseases, and what education interventions can support them?
They're not aware of. I suppose they are not aware of rare disease as such, because that is not a part of their curriculum, and that is what we want to kind of bring in. Sorry, what was the question? One is they are not aware of, I can say. What is the other part?
That means how can we educate, or education interventions can support these ASHA workers?
Oh yeah, definitely. That is why we are taking this initiative, that if we have to start, we have to start at two level. One is the top policymaker level, where we have to sensitize them that there is a need for policy direction for inclusion of rare diseases in the existing public health program. And next is to go to the complete ground level, grassroots level healthcare worker, work with them, try to understand if we have to sensitize them, it is not that one day we can go and conduct a training program and say them, these are the diseases, go and identify them. We have to sensitize them. So there are cases, and sensitize them in what sense? There are cases we often see where one patient, one family have 3 children of the same disease, and they just take it for granted as God's wish or God's punishment or something, and there is no intervention happening. Now, here is where the grassroots level healthcare workers role. Ashas are community members, like they are from that community. They're the only one who can go and talk to the family and say, see, your child has this, your child is, your child has some uh, some issue. I don't want to use the word disability or defect or anything, but it has some birth defect, something is wrong with your child, first child. If you are pregnant, you go and check with the first available intervention center. It could be the district health center, or it could be the regional, whatever center that has to be identified, but the Nidan Kendras are there from DBT. So all of that, so that intervention, and it can only be done through Ashas, who can get the information, who can spread the message. And even at the community level, if a recessive or genetic disorder is quite common in that community, that information, that prenatal diagnosis should be there, or prenatal counseling should be there, or premarital counseling should be there. All of that, the information can only be spread through this grassroots healthcare workers. So they have a huge role to play.
And next question is on gene therapy. Is gene therapy a one-stop solution for all kinds of rare diseases?
All kinds of rare diseases is a difficult question. Only for the ones that they have been worked upon. It is, I think, it definitely looks like a one-stop solution, but maybe it is too early to say so if it is a one-stop solution. But it is, I think, definitely the most positive solution we have in hand now.
One question is like, for doing research on rare diseases, what course one can study after 12th, and which countries are more in the frontier for rare disease research and related education, and in their treatment too?
Okay, so definitely the developed world, the Western countries, if you ask which countries, see, it's a matter of resource. So when you have enough resource to look into the common problems, then you go into the specific problems. So that is why it's better managed there. But I think if you, as a student perspective, as a researcher perspective, India is the hot spot to be researching on rare diseases. You don't need to go anywhere. You can just be here, and you are in the hotspot. You have like multiple options to this, and the capabilities are also there to kind of intervene. How to say, if you see like Dr. Thangraj's work is an exemplary work, the kind of work they have done to identifying the mutations and all that. So all of this is already happening in India. What course? Rare diseases are not included any course. Some of the medical curriculum are trying specific colleges, they're trying to include specific courses in medical curriculum, but as such there is no course. So you have to understand these are just diseases. If you have to identify what kind of intervention you want to do. If you want to do molecular intervention, genomics intervention, you study that and then come and implement here. If you want to do public health intervention, study that and then come and implement. You can see it as a implementation ground. Study the intervention and come and implement your skill and knowledge into this ground.
I think people are that much interested in your talk, so many questions are coming up, and this is the last question for you. You have mentioned about pharmacies and biotechnology fields refusing and not being interested in making drugs or medicine. Do you find any solution for that?
So last slide you have missed, I think, whoever has written the question, where I said how the interest has actually driven opposite way. Now they are actually driven towards every big pharma, all the big pharmas of the world, Pfizer, Novartis, and all that you can mention. Everyone is running after orphan drugs. So yeah, so it's a reverse drive happening now.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your valuable information. And now over to our HOD.
Thank you, Dr. Mahua, for the nice insight and a very good patient journey and policy support for the stakeholders, and appreciate your research work and advocacy. And thank you for joining us. Thank you once again. And over to Mitri for the vote of thanks.
Good evening to one and all present here. I deem it a great honor and privilege that I got the opportunity to propose the vote of thanks on this memorable occasion. On behalf of our college and the management, I extend my sincere gratitude to our distinguished guest, Dr. Thangaraj K., Director of Center of DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics, and Dr. Mohua Chakrabarti Chowdhury, DST STI Policy Fellow at the Center for Policy Research, who, despite their busy schedule, has found time to grace this occasion. Thank you, sir and ma'am, for giving us more knowledge about rare diseases. I thank you for making this occasion very interesting. We are grateful to our director and manager, Reverend Dr. Tito Verghese, CMI. His able guidance and support has always encouraged us. I thank him for his kindness and ceaseless support. I thank our dear principal, Dr. Jolly Jacob, for her support and commitment. Her constant support and diligence have transformed this institution into a most sought after one. My heartfelt thanks to our bursar, Father Sibin Kutur, CMI, for his valuable contribution, guidance, and encouragement. I thank Mrs. Manju Rose Matthews, Head of the Department of Media Studies, whose hard work and initiative paved way for this program. Last but not the least, I owe a special gratitude to all the faculty members and students of Nagar College and all other invitees from various countries, as well as various parts of our country, whose cooperation and participation made this program into a grand success. I request all the participants to fill in the feedback form given to get their participation certificate. Before we share the feedback form, I would like to make a quick announcement. We are organizing an international conference on 23 to 24 March 2023 in association with ESSET School of Communication, Kochi, India, Artificial Intelligence, Journalism for Research and Forecasting, UAE, Free Bits, USA, and Focus Games, UK. The conference is titled Impetus 2023 International Conference on Content for Public Good, Reimagining Media Ecosystem in the Era of Paywalls and Generative All. Inviting research papers from the academic fraternity. For more information, please check the YouTube description box. Now, the feedback link is open. It is shared in the chat window. Without further ado, I would like to wind up the program. Good night to all. Signing off, Mitra Venugopal, Department of Media Studies, Nagar College, Maranallur, Trivandrum, Kerala. Thank you for joining. See you next time.